And feel free to go to the green room if you want.
The green room?
Yeah. It's the St. Patrick's Day thing is still going on in the green room. One day later. Okay. So she kind of skipped over her SB 54 timeline slide, but lucky for everyone in the room, our next speaker is Rob Hilton on SB 54, Upstream Solutions and Downstream Impacts. Also, hangs out in Sacramento a lot. Rob is the president and partner at Hilton Thorncroft and Hobson, bringing 20 years of experience in solid waste consulting with a focus on complex data-focused projects and stakeholder engagement. He has successfully managed over 580 projects for more than 150 public agencies across the USA, addressing diverse challenges, recycling organic solid waste services. He's been a leading voice in SB 54 implementation, including engaging regulatory process and key stakeholder groups and presenting at local and statewide events like this. Welcome, Rob.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. How exciting. We got the regs done over the finish line, right? Well, that's what Julia told me that I would get to say up on this stage on March 18th when she recruited me to talk about SB 54. That didn't happen. So let me start with a little bit of a disclaimer, which is that I am here today representing my own perspective and not that of any of my clients, including CalRecycle and maybe especially CalRecycle since they're back in rulemaking. So everything you hear today from me will be based on my own perspective and experience. Oh, there we go. So how many of you have been engaged in the SB 54 process at some level, and how many of you need this slide on the background? All right, better than half of you. So I'm going to go quickly on this slide. So SB 54 promises to bring EPR for single-use packaging and plastic single-use foodware. It establishes a required recyclables and compostables list through some sister legislation, and it requires that anything that gets sold at a certain point be either recyclable or compostable. It also establishes targets for various products at various timelines for actual recycling of those materials. It established a producer responsibility organization, and ours is Circular Action Alliance, and it has multifaceted goals, including some reuse and source reduction and support for disadvantaged communities. So there's what SB 54 is hoping to do. For those of you in the room that have spent your careers working in the recycling and waste management industry in California, you know we've already come pretty far in this state. Other states that are looking at EPR for packaging have a lot of ground to make up against where we've already gone. And because of that, the statute protects local programs, local jurisdictions, and their service providers who really are the backbone of making this work. They promise that the only thing that local jurisdictions will be obligated to do under the law is to have an accepted recyclables and accepted compostables lists for your collection programs. Local jurisdictions were not supposed to be burdened with anything else under the law. We'll see. So now that we're back to rulemaking again, we need to have our eyes on a couple of really critical issues. We need all of you re-engaged for another year, slogging through this and making sure that we get the best version of SB 54 out of the discussions. So one of the key principles is any of the costs involved in achieving the legislative intent need to be reimbursed to recycling service providers and local jurisdictions to make sure that ratepayers don't pick up the balance. When I'm at the table with haulers and processors around the state and I ask them, hey, you're going to give us a pass on 54, right? That's going to be covered. You're not going to have a change in law opener. They say, no, of course not, because we haven't been made whole on any prior EPR regs. So they don't trust this process. we shouldn't trust this process either. We should be really engaged and make sure that we've got our eyes on the ball for the cost recovery. We need to make sure that it is clear which costs are eligible and ineligible. And right now they're telling us we won't know that until the pro plan comes out in over a year. It's also worth noting that the governor's message to Cal Recycle and to the state Senate was a concern about affordability of the implementation of SB 54. I have personal opinions about how the economic analysis was done, and I don't think it's going to be as expensive as was discussed. But I think that's another thing that we've really got to keep our eyes on through this. I'm concerned that affordability is going to turn into ratepayers picking up the tab on this instead of the producers. One of the key aspects of that is how the payment mechanism is going to work. And they've been discussing a couple of different approaches. One is a cost-based reimbursement methodology that might work a little bit like CRV grants that you're used to, where it's guaranteed. And as long as you spend it on something that's eligible, you will get those costs reimbursed, but you've got to demonstrate the costs and demonstrate the expenditure. On the other hand, they may implement a performance-based reimbursement system where you get paid per pound for covered materials, and maybe there are different reimbursement rates. There's a lot of money at stake. If you just take $1 billion a year in reimbursement budget and divide that by 40 million Californians, that's $25 per resident per year. The economic analysis says it's 3.6 billion, so it's even more than this. But if you just take your jurisdiction's population, multiply it by $25 per resident per year, and think about what kind of impact that can make in your programs and in rate relief, it can be significant. We're not talking about small dollars here. We also need transparency. One of the things that we're seriously concerned about through this is that the producers have an interest in making some of this opaque to us. We already lost the transparency in AB 901 that we were supposed to get around the recycling and composting system. This is another opportunity for us to get that transparency about what's happening with these dollars, what's happening with these materials, to make sure that we're hitting the targets and that we're implementing policy effectively. I am optimistic that the pro knows what they're doing, at least on the technology side of this and on the data management side of this. And I think they will be very sophisticated with that data. I think it's important that we demand transparency around it. Okay, little commercial for where you can jump in and start to engage with this. So underway right now is the SB 54 collection, processing, and end markets needs assessment. It just got started. This forms the basis for the pro plan for the funding back to local jurisdictions and their service providers. It's intended to look at the current system, assess any gaps in the current system to the achievement of those goals, look at the processing system, look at collection, look at end markets, and understand what's going to be needed both operationally and from a dollars and cents perspective to make this work. Everybody has skin in this game. Local jurisdictions, there's reimbursement money available potentially for you where you can demonstrate that you have real costs to get there. Haulers certainly will have impacts, particularly in areas that don't have 100% access to collection systems. Facility operators may need to make upgrades to their facilities to improve their yield rates on certain materials. There should be reimbursements coming back. There's a focus on disadvantaged communities and on EJ communities that are around these facilities. And if we don't hear from those folks about the impacts that they're experiencing, we can't document that. We can't mitigate those things. And then obviously the general public. There is some concern from the governor's office about the affordability of this. And if the general public is going to be relieved of some of that burden, we need folks speaking up. So as the needs assessment reaches out for engagement, as you start seeing those solicitations from Cal Recycle and the consulting team asking you to participate in surveys, I know it's not fun, surveys suck, but if you participate in the survey, you form the data basis for getting more back to the systems that need them. All right. I have the same feeling about this milestone chart. We did change some things on it, and we've extended the regulatory timeline now technically until March of 26. CalRecycle doesn't have to take all of that time. They just have to get this back to the Office of Administrative Law before March of 26. And there is some direction on what they need to be approaching. Nothing else really changes though. And so we need folks to stay engaged in the process. The needs assessment is still underway. The target dates for the pro plan are still as they were in the statute. And so this is going to be an intense year monitoring the regulatory changes. The producers will be in the state capitol lobbying heavily. They got out in the media and talked about that. And I think it's important to know that while we're talking in the regulatory space, they're going to be seeking new bills to try and override some of what was done here. So stay informed, stay engaged, go to the CalRecycle workshops, go to the advisory board meetings. The advisory board is going to be a key place where these discussions are playing out. This Friday, they're having one. It's going to be interesting. Bring the popcorn. Collaborate with your service providers and your local agencies. Those folks should really be working hand in glove on the responses to these needs assessment data requests. And then if you are talking to folks that aren't engaged in this process, it's getting serious. We stand a chance of losing what we've been fighting for a really long time for. And so we need to get more folks engaged. The producers and their lobbyists certainly are. Thank you.
Nailed it. All right, we got up to 5 minutes for questions, and I want to remind Rob and other speakers to repeat a question that's not off a mic. That's for the folks watching from home. Oh, and Todd, if you have a question from cyberspace, let me know. Go ahead, Rob.
All right.
Who's got questions for Rob?
Peter?
Styrofoam banned in California.
Is styrofoam banned in California? Who thinks so? Let's get thumbs up. Who thinks not? We don't know right now. They haven't affected the implementation of that. They sent some letters asking the styrofoam folks to prove that they had or had not made the rate, and we haven't heard back. Where do we think compost plastics are going to end up? My understanding is they did not end up on the final CMC list, covered material categories list for January 1 of this year. That list can change from time to time, but basically because of the NOP standard, composters are saying we don't want it. Who else?
Makers of degradable packaging are not happy about it.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. What do you think about that? It seemed like a side effect to me.
I'm going to go ahead and not jump into the middle of that. I can tell you that what happened is California politics, and it was messy. There's lots of stories about what was going on behind closed doors, and I'm not fully convinced that affordability was really the primary argument, but it sounded good.
So, the regulations are the first week of March, and they're not. Do they have to restart the regulatory process? Like, how do you exactly work? Like, I don't know if that's in
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, you may hear it officially from CalRecycle. Again, I'm not speaking on their behalf. My understanding of the regulatory process is that when they failed to meet the deadline to go to Office of Administrative Law, the regs turned into a pumpkin and they have to start over again. And they have 1 year from when they restart the regulatory process to get that submittal to OAL. So it's basically a start over, though I anticipate they will start from the last draft they were working on.
At the risk of sounding,
Remind your acronyms. Sorry, what was that? Where do we ship our what?
return label from like nowhere. Send it off. Wherever the manufacturers are.
If you make the labels, I'll send some with you. No, and that is one of the goals of the bill, is to create responsible end markets for this material that aren't harming the environment and that aren't harming the people that are working in the facilities. And that's one of the things that is being looked at in the needs assessment for end markets. So one more. This might be the last one.
I'm wondering, if there's opportunities similar to how plastic lobbyists lobby and run, like around 500 of us in this room representing California residents and cities. Is there an opportunity now for us to collectively lobby to see the change in the regs that we as jurisdictions want to see? And if so, what steps would you recommend?
I am not the best activist in this room. There are lots of great activists in this room that are probably better at organizing around that than I am. But what I would say is the industry is lobbying. They're going to be lobbying hard this year. They're going to seek bills to do, end runs on what the statute was intended to do. I am sure that the Enviro NGOs that were the face of this and the face of the ballot measure are going to be activated and organizing. And I think joining in their efforts is probably the strongest way to play. But again, I'm not the best activist in the room.
I think that's going to be the last question, unfortunately. Unless it's a miracle short question and answer. Go ahead, try it.
Maybe it's a long one. As a local government, statutory requirement, if we state function, but we don't have all the related yet. We don't know what to do. And we'll have even show why. Not just the collection requirement, but for those of us who operate, who are working for this, how to think about how to change those requirements. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on like things that we should keep an eye on specifically, part of some like working groups, kind of collectively address these.
Yeah, there are different working groups activated around different areas of the bill. And so I think finding your space, if it's in the reuse space or if it's in the processing space or the EJ space or whatever, finding where you can engage. There's lots of angles to this thing.
All right. That's it. If you want, yeah.
Yeah, one question.
Talk to Rob. No more questions. Sorry. This is recycling update. This is Boone's memory that we're honoring. We got to move the program. So, but thanks to Rob.